20th Sunday in Ordinary Time.
A reading from the book of the prophet Isaiah. Thus says the Lord, observe what is right, do what is just. For my salvation is about to come, my justice about to be revealed. The foreigners who join themselves to the Lord, ministering to him, loving the name of the Lord and becoming his servants, all who keep the Sabbath free from profanation and hold to my covenant, them I will bring to my holy mountain and make joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices will be acceptable on my altar. For my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. The word of the Lord.
A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Romans. Brothers and sisters, I am speaking to you Gentiles. Inasmuch as I am the apostle to the Gentiles, I glory in my ministry in order to make my race jealous, and thus save some of them. For if their rejection is the reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? For the gifts and the call of God are irrevocable. Just as you once disobeyed God, but have now received mercy because of their disobedience, so they have now disobeyed in order that, by virtue of the mercy shown to you, they too may now receive mercy. For God delivered all to disobedience, that he might have mercy upon all. The word of the Lord.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. At that time, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a Canaanite woman of that district came and called out, "Have pity on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But Jesus did not say a word in answer to her. Jesus' disciples came and asked him, "Send her away, for she keeps calling out after us." He said in reply, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But the woman came and did Jesus homage, saying, "Lord, help me." He said in reply, "It is not right to take the food of the children and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Please, Lord, for even the dogs eat the scraps that fall from the table of their masters." Then Jesus said to her in reply, "O woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And the woman's daughter was healed from that hour. The Gospel of the Lord.
The 20th Sunday in Ordinary Time. The first reading comes from Isaiah 56, verse 1 and verses 6 to 7. This comes from a part of the book of Isaiah that we call Trito-Isaiah, chapters 56 to 66. And this was written by an author or authors after the return of the Jewish people from exile in Babylon, 539 BC. What the Jewish people found when they arrived in Palestine was that many of the people had learned to live a religious life without the intervention of the priests. And in fact, they wanted to continue their practices. One of the things that they had done is that they had allowed foreigners to worship with the people of the Lord. Remember, there were no sacrifices because the temple had been destroyed, but there were prayer services. In fact, around this time might have been the beginning of the synagogue. And the foreigners were allowed to participate in the holy things of Israel. Now the returning Jewish priests said that they should be excluded. This is that constant tension between universalism, that if there's only one God, He's the God of all peoples, and selection, that God has chosen the Israelites as a chosen people. And we see that same tension between our Catholic faith and the call of all people to follow God. It's not that one or the other is completely right. It's that we have to respect both of them as much as we can in any given situation. The second reading comes from Romans 11, 13 to 15, and 29 to 32. In this part of the letter to the Romans, Paul is trying to show that he's not anti-Jewish. Rather, he loves the Jewish people, and because of that, he would love them to accept Christ, because Christ is the Messiah whom Yahweh sent. Here he speaks about the fact that maybe God has a plan in all of this, that maybe the Jewish people were intended to rebel so that the Gentiles could be invited in. And now that the Gentiles are invited in, maybe the Jewish people will become jealous and they'll want to come back. This is all part of God's plan, but we can't say that God has rejected the Jewish people. The Jewish people might have turned their back on God's messenger, but God always loves them. His promise is irrevocable. One of the words that's used for God in the Old Testament is emet, faithfulness, fidelity, that God is always truthful to His promise, even when we're not. The Gospel comes from Matthew 15, 21 to 29. We hear that Jesus is in pagan territory. And this is a bit odd because this is Matthew's Gospel, the Gospel where Jesus has come to heal those who are ill in Israel. There's a Syrophoenician woman, a Canaanite woman, who's obviously a pagan, who asks Jesus to have mercy on her. In fact, she calls Jesus Son of David, recognizing that he's a Jewish Messiah, recognizing that he's a descendant of David. Nevertheless, she asks that he intervene because her daughter is tormented by a demon. What does he first respond to her? It's not right to give the food of the children to the dogs. Now that's very, very insulting. Dogs were considered unclean animals by Jewish people. They ate carrion and therefore they were unclean. Is Jesus expressing racial prejudice, or is he simply using a saying that was common in his days? It's not clear. The woman, however, gives a great response. Even the dogs get to eat the crumbs from the table. She uses a little bit of chutzpah, a little bit of pushiness, to almost force Jesus to give her the miracle. And what is Jesus' response to her? Your faith is great. But we have to remember, this is in the context of a lot of Jewish people who are not expressing faith in the mission of Jesus. They keep doubting him, asking for signs. This Syrophoenician woman who's a pagan shows a greater faith than the Jewish people. And in fact, the woman's daughter is healed. And this will be common in these chapters. We see examples of pagans who have a greater faith than the Jewish people. Often it's the people we least expect who have a more profound faith than we do. Sometimes we get caught up in our theological reasoning, or we overthink things and don't have that simple faith of the people who might not be well educated, but who have a natural wisdom that surpasses our own. And may God bless us.